Pleasant morning to everyone. I'd like to thank the ADR Institute for inviting me here this morning to discuss with you the Arbitral Award. Since July 12, 2016, when the Arbitral Award was issued, and up to today, which is the third anniversary of the historic Arbitral Award that overwhelmingly favored the Philippines, the present government administration has done absolutely nothing to enforce the award. The administration has given two reasons for this glaring inaction. First, China is a friend and the Philippines should not offend a friend. Second, enforcing the Arbitral Award means going to war with China. Both reasons, of course, are totally specious. First, China is the only country in the world that has recently seized Philippine territory, and that is Scarborough Shoal. China is also the only country in the world that is claiming Philippine exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea. China is even preventing the Philippines from exploiting the oil and gas in Philippine exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea. Also, Chinese fishermen, supported by the Chinese maritime militia under the command of the PLA Navy, are pillaging the rich fishing grounds within the Philippine exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea. How can a country that has committed obviously unfriendly acts against the Philippines and continues to do so be considered a friend of the Philippines? Second, the claim that enforcing the Arbitral Award means going to war with China, a war that the Philippines will surely lose, is an utterly false claim designed to intimidate the Filipino people to submit to the will of China. The Philippines cannot go to war with China to enforce the Arbitral Award because the Philippine Constitution prohibits it. The 1987 Philippine Constitution has renounced war as an instrument of national policy. The same provision can be found in the 1935 and the 1937 Philippine Constitutions. It is clearly unconstitutional for the Philippine government to go to war with China to enforce the Arbitral Award. It is also against international law to go to war to enforce the Arbitral Award. The UN Charter has outlawed resort to war to settle territorial or maritime disputes between states. A war of aggression renders the leaders of the aggressor state liable under the Rome Statute that established the International Criminal Court. If the war of aggression is referred by the Security Council to the ICC can assume jurisdiction even if the aggressor state is not a member of the Rome Statute. Thus, it is obvious that the only purpose of raising the specter of war is to scare the Filipino people to submit to China. Even as the present government administration has not done anything to enforce the Arbitral Award, it has committed acts intentionally or unintentionally that risk waiving or diminishing the Arbitral Award. First, President Duterte, early in his presidency, unilaterally declared that he was setting aside the Arbitral Award. Fortunately, the Department of Foreign Affairs immediately clarified that the President was not abandoning the award. This clarification was made 4 hours before China welcomed and accepted the unilateral declaration. The DFA clarification before China's acceptance prevented the unilateral declaration from becoming legally binding on the Philippines under the international law doctrine of unilateral declarations. We were saved by the skin of our teeth from what could have been a self-inflicted fatal blow to our sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea. Second, the President recently declared that he had a verbal agreement with President Xi that Filipinos could fish in Scarborough Shoal while the Chinese could fish in Reed Bank. In other news report, the area where the Chinese could fish covers the entire West Philippine Sea, not only the Reed Bank. This is of course unconstitutional since the Constitution mandates that the exploitation of the natural resources in Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, which includes the Reed Bank, is reserved exclusively for Filipinos. The Exclusive Economic Zone is so named because the economic exploitation of this 200 nautical mile maritime area is reserved exclusively to the adjacent coastal state. There are three levels of law recognizing the exclusivity of this maritime area. First, customary international law recognizes the exclusivity of this maritime area. A state does not have to accede to or ratify UNCLOS to claim this exclusivity in its constitution or statutes to be entitled to this exclusivity under international law. Under Philippine Constitution, customary international law is automatically incorporated as part of Philippine domestic law. Second, this 200 nautical mile exclusivity was first created in UNCLOS as part of the grand bargain among all states, including China and the Philippines, that negotiated UNCLOS. Without an agreement on this 200 nautical mile exclusivity, there would be no UNCLOS today. Third, the 1987 Philippine Constitution expressly reserves the use and enjoyment of this 200 nautical maritime area exclusively for Filipinos. Exclusively means only for Filipinos, to the exclusion of all other nationalities, including foreign nationals who may be the best friend forever of the present government administration. Thus, the verbal agreement between President Xi and President Duterte clearly violates the Constitution. Equally important, this verbal agreement is grossly and manifestly lopsided in favor of China. Scarborough Shoal has an area of only 150 square kilometers, while Reed Bank has an area of 8,866 square kilometers. The Chinese can fish in an area 59 times larger than Scarborough Shoal. China has the largest fishing fleet in the world, numbering over 220,000 motorized vessels, including more than 2,500 huge modern steel-hulled trawlers that roam the oceans and seas of the world. The Chinese fishing fleet can rapidly deplete the fish in Reed Bank and even in the entire West Philippine Sea. In contrast, Filipino fishermen operate wooden boats with outriggers, and these wooden boats are dwarfed by the huge Chinese trawlers. Moreover, Filipinos can fish only outside the lagoon of Scarborough Shoal, where there are fewer fish, since it is inside the lagoon where the fish abound. The Philippines must reject this verbal agreement. We cannot allow this lopsided agreement, grossly and manifestly disadvantageous to the Filipino people, to govern fishing in the Reed Bank and even in other, and if the other news reports are correct, even in the entire West Philippine Sea, an area larger than the total land area of the Philippines. The Filipino people must voice out this sentiment and tell our congressmen and senators and members of the cabinet that this lopsided verbal agreement is extremely prejudicial to the Filipino people. If the Philippine government confirms this verbal agreement, then China can demand, under international law, the implementation of this agreement, as long as China allows Filipinos to fish in Scarborough Shoal. It costs China nothing to allow Filipinos to fish outside the lagoon of Scarborough Shoal. In the first place, under the arbitral award, Filipinos have a right to fish in Scarborough Shoal, even inside the lagoon. The agreement, of course, will substantially diminish the arbitral award, a self-inflicted blow again to our sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea. We must therefore do everything to convince the present government administration not to confirm or ratify the supposed verbal agreement with China. Not everything is doom and gloom in the West Philippine Sea. There is a silver lining, and that is the freedom of navigation and overflight operations, or FONOPS, of the US, UK, France, Australia, Japan, India, and Canada in the South China Sea, including the West Philippine Sea. These FONOPS, or freedom of navigation and overflight operations, assert that there is freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea because there are high seas and exclusive economic zones in the South China Sea. Under UNCLOS, even under customary international law, There's freedom of navigation and overflight in the high seas and exclusive economic zones of the world. The FONOPs are a peaceful and lawful exercise of the rights of the navies of coastal states. When these naval powers conduct FONOPs in the West Philippine Sea, they assert that there is an exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea. The only adjacent coastal state in the West Philippine Sea is the Philippines, and thus the resources in the West Philippine Seas could only belong to the Philippines. The FONOPs of these naval powers powerfully refute the Chinese claim that there are no high seas or exclusive economic zones within China's 9-line claim in the South China Sea. In effect, the FONOPs of these naval powers enforce the arbitral award. Fortunately, the FONOPs of these naval powers have increased in frequency in the last 2 years. These FONOPs are the most robust enforcement of the arbitral award. Even as I speak now, a warship of these naval powers may be sailing in the South China Sea to refute China's 9-line claim and in effect enforce the arbitral award. The Philippines should, of course, welcome and even encourage the FONOPs of these naval powers. Unfortunately, the present government administration has distanced itself from these FONOPs, stating that the Philippines does not take sides in the dispute between China and its naval powers over these FONOPs in the South China Sea. However, I believe that the over 90% of Filipinos who want the arbitral award enforced, as reported in SWS surveys, would gladly welcome the FONOPs of these naval powers. Only China and those who do not want the arbitral award enforced would oppose these FONOPs. I personally welcome and even encourage these FONOPs and hope that in the future the Philippine Navy could join the FONOPs of these naval powers to refute China's 9-line claim and enforce the arbitral award. We cannot seriously ask the US to fire the first armed missile, nuclear or non-nuclear, against China. That would be a war of aggression, which is outlawed under the UN Charter. That would also not be authorized under the US-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty, which operates only for mutual self-defense. That is, if either party is the victim of armed aggression and not the aggressor state. There is also no need to ask the US to send its 7th Fleet to the West Philippine Sea, because the US is already conducting continuously freedom of navigation and overflight in the West Philippine Sea. All that the Philippines has to do is to send the Philippine Navy on joint patrol with the US Navy and with the other naval powers of the world when they conduct FONOPs in the West Philippine Sea. As the present government administration continues to hesitate to enforce the arbitral award, individual Filipinos in their private capacity have stepped up to enforce the arbitral award. I refer to the communication to the International Criminal Court filed by former DFA Secretary Albert De Rosario, former Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales, and their counsel, Attorney Anne-Marie Corominas, charging President Xi and other Chinese leaders of a crime against humanity for depriving tens of thousands of Filipinos of their source of food and livelihood when China dredged several atolls in the Spratlys. The penalty for this crime against humanity includes compensation to the Filipino victims of the destruction of the marine environment in the Spratlys, a destruction that has been characterized as severe and permanent by the Hague Tribunal in the arbitral award. I commend these 3 patriotic Filipinos for taking up the cudgels for the entire Filipino people. In summary, while the present government administration puts into deep freeze the enforcement of the arbitral award, we must remain vigilant that there is no waiver or diminishment of the arbitral award, whether intentional or not. We must be thankful to the real and true friends of the Filipino people, the naval powers that are conducting FONOPs in the West Philippine Sea and are actually enforcing the arbitral award. And we must continue to explore creative and innovative ways through which Filipinos, as private citizens, can fortify and enforce the arbitral award. Thank you for your kind attention and a good day to everyone.